Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Moscow City Council Public Works Finance Committee meeting for July 24th. On my right is Walter Steed, and on my left is Gina Terusio. Representing city staff is Gary Riedner. And the first item on our agenda today is approval of the minutes from the July 10th meeting, which I did not attend, so it's up to you guys to approve those. I guess I'll have to abstain.
We too handled that, and it's okay. The minutes are okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll consider that passed. Item number 2 is a public meeting, reconsideration of a condition of approval for lot division at 335 Lauder Avenue. And apparently Ryan's filling in for Bill here on this one. Good afternoon, Ryan.
We have pictures.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm going to try to make this as short and sweet as possible. Many of you are familiar with this site, so we don't want to be too redundant with it, but for the record, we'll go ahead and do some quick overview on the overall public meeting for the reconsideration of a condition of approval for lot division at 335 Lauder Avenue. So September 8th, 2015, there was original lot division request for 335 Lauder Avenue, as located on this site map here. The overall findings from that initial city council meeting included the division of 3 separate lots from the subject property of 16,469 square feet. Subject property is located between Taylor and Lauder Avenue, specifically on the bend of Lauder Avenue where it becomes a bisected road, or essentially a right turn only road. A little bit of reference for the zoning. R4 is surrounding the neighboring locations, as well as R1 to the south along Ridge Road, and the University Zoning District and Married Student Housing to the north along Taylor. So as you can see here, we have the approved with conditions on the lot division from the 2015 City Council meeting. Parcel A, B, and C, as indicated, are the plotted and approved maps. Here we have the overall survey and the parcel of record with the assessor's office. A couple things to note from the last hearing. We wanted to identify and highlight a couple items that were overlooked during that time frame. Essentially, we're looking at the easements for the access into parcel B and C. So you can see easement A along the southern portion of parcel A's location, and easement B along parcels C and B. So cleaned up, this is the proposed second access or second curb cut request from the design team of Hodge & Associates. Again, you can see in this particular hearing is regarding parcel A's access, and parcel B and C to the south, you can see where the indicated access point as well as the shared easements are located on the property. Now there is also questions on the access and how the circulation will happen. So I've taken the liberty of kind of showing all of you some flows of traffic. Again, this is for the proposed and most likely course of action for parcel A. As you can see, any residences or anybody accessing parcel A will continue east on Lauder, and again, that's an ingress and egress on request as part of the request for the second curb cut. Again, the typical flow of the traffic would nose into the section where you can see the overall easement and then reverse into the parking stall, while parcel B and C continue on to the first and approved number 1 curb cut.
Already approved.
Correct. Already approved curb cut. And again, as a secondary course of action for parcel A, you will see ingress and egress for all 3 parcels within that location. Again, we can see for the record the proposed access points, the approved access number 1, and the requested for access 2 as far as the locations on the bend of Lauder. Again, note the divided roadway. As we look at it here, the only access is going to be right turn only. Staff's recommendation, the original recommendation, stating from Public Works showed that the topography and unusual roadway configuration in this stretch could create safety issues if many approaches were grouped tightly together in this area, i.e. worst case scenario having 3 points of access within those 3 parcels, as city code currently allows at least 1 approach per property, which would have resulted in 3 in close proximity to each other. Again, from the last hearing, the Public Works recommendation was the original condition of approval allowing 1 approach was recommended because it generally made approaches grouped tightly together in one area, which can create safety issues. From the second memo as included in your packets, it states that the adverse effect to traffic safety added by allowing the additional approach to the northwest will likely be negligible because both approaches would be restricted to and right out turning movements, and the proposed configuration eliminates the need for backing out maneuvers. The recommendation from Public Works is the Public Works does not oppose the proposal to add a second approach onto Louder Avenue, and thus Community Development and staff requests for approval of this project.
Thank you, Ryan. As I remember this from last time, there was confusion about whether if the ownership changed and someone blocked off the access from between A and the B and C parcels, we'd have problems, and it seems like that's been kind of cleaned up, and I'm all good with it this time.
Ron, can you go back to your ABC picture?
Yes, sir.
Please. Now, this is just for demonstration purposes.
Correct.
A, B, and C can each use either driveway for egress or ingress.
For access point 1, sir. The first curb cut.
B and C are not allowed to come in A?
Correct.
How is that going to be governed?
It's up to the individual parcel owners. The overall access from that in the request is to have an ingress and egress for parcel A.
I understand. But you've got an existing easement that allows A to go into B to use the existing driveway. That easement will remain.
Correct.
So A can do both, but is that easement written such that B cannot go into A? I guess that's my only remaining confusion.
How that easement is written would be determined between the different owners. It'd be up to each individual lot owner to come to some sort of civil agreement in between there. And correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, if you have any further clarification then.
Does my question make any sense?
Yeah, I see your question. That makes sense to me. That if B and C decide they want to turn in the first driveway all the time, and is A going to object to that? And does he have a right to object?
And I don't know whether we care or not. I was just wanting to find out.
Right, yeah, Scott Becker with Hodge & Associates, 405 South Washington. There's not going to be any blocking of that access. Really, it was just to make it easier for Parcel A to gain access. There's a good chance that Parcel B and C will not be developed for quite some time, and Parcel A would like to develop that first access if that's the only one for now that would be developed. It just gives him some options. But the only thing that would preclude him from using the upper access would be if you have 2 cars parked there, it's going to be, they'll be in the way. They can't come through there.
Okay. If I may, Jim, my only remaining question is the city, the engineer, and the owner all on the same page now?
Yes, sir. Yes, that's correct.
That was our real problem last time, was we were getting 3 different opinions of exactly what we were trying to do.
Yes, sir. Yep, all 3 of us are on board.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think it gives us a snow removal, a winter situation that's better too. If you can move snow around and allow people to get in and out where you might not have been able to before. So I like that idea.
Before the commission passes that, if I may enter one memorandum for record, if I may, Mr. Commissioner. I did have one email correspondence. This is from John A. Miller from 482 Ridge Road in Moscow. And he states, Mr. Cash, I may not be able to make the public hearing this coming Monday concerning the property at 335 Louder. I wish to register my concern that this is a public safety issue involved with the proposed approaches to Louder Avenue. I drive that S-shaped road daily in both directions and am very familiar with the present configuration of the roadway and of the hazards it already possesses. As you know, the 2 lanes, one westbound and one eastbound, are on different elevations on a curve that goes over a rise. The curves are banked for taking at speed and visibility is limited. Even so, people drive it briskly because of the banking and steepness of the little hill. I often see bicyclists negotiating the little hill and cars having to adjust quickly and narrowly for the roadway. There is no bike lane and the sidewalk is often occupied by pedestrians. There's also a high curb in places. This is an important connector for persons walking, riding, and driving to campus. In short, it's a busy, dangerous, twisty little stretch of road. Adding another driveway to it is not an appealing idea. I think that it would make more sense for the lots in question to access the street from Boyd Avenue. Barring that, I think it is clear that the ingress approach should be limited to the right lane going east, and egress should be limited to going out in the same easterly direction. Allowing left turns out of that property would be quite dangerous and would also not require significant re-engineering of the roadway because of the different levels for eastbound and westbound lanes. The present configuration of the roadway presents an unfortunate combination of circumstances that makes adding new approaches dangerous and problematic. It would be best if the landowners negotiated driving access to their lots for Boyd. If access off ladder is permitted, both ingress and egress should involve traveling east. No left turn out of the property shall be permitted. Sincerely, John A. Miller.
Seems we've addressed that.
There's no way to turn left short of driving the wrong way up a one-way street.
Right. And there's no access off of Boyd, so this property is, the right-of-way access is on Louder.
If I may, do we need a one-way sign in the curb median?
You can't drive a car across that.
I'm talking about turning. I'm talking about turning left and driving the wrong way up Louder.
Oh, I think that's highly unlikely. When you pull out to an intersection and you see a curb in the middle of the road, you know you can't make it to the other lane.
Yeah.
Would you pull out into the wrong lane?
Would I? No, but would somebody else?
Maybe if you were from England?
Public Works can certainly consider that, but we don't put one-way signs at the entrance and exit of every private driveway.
I know we don't.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's
Just a
probably
thought.
unnecessary.
Public
That's-
Works
that's
will
my
certainly take a look
opinion.
at that.
Okay.
Gina?
I would just highly recommend what you mentioned, or what Mr. Miller even mentioned, get it communicated about quickly and early and lots of times between the neighbors. I think that's going to be key. If we start blocking one or the other, that would not be good. So just be good neighbors. Get along.
Another comment towards Mr. Miller's letter is that if I'm on a bicycle and I'm negotiating that corner and there's a car behind me, if I have a driveway that I can bail out, is better than a high curb. So I see that as a safety enhancement, not a detriment.
This is nothing
Just in
really
case he's watching.
to do with the question, but I'm curious, how do people that are in those apartments east of this, how do they get to the college? Is there a sidewalk
Yes.
on both sides?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've driven it, but I'm too busy watching the road to look for sidewalks.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm okay with it still.
Yeah, me too.
All right. With that, I guess I would recommend approval and amending the 2015 lot division approval to allow two vehicular approaches.
And should
Put
we
that on
put
consent?
should we put it on regular in case the gentleman wants to come speak to it?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I think
That's the
it doesn't take
purpose
a
of
huge
this
amount of
public meeting, actually. It's, the public input is supposed to take place at this meeting. That's why we have the code set up the way it is.
So you would prefer it goes on consent?
It can go either way, but
I kinda
it's up to the mayor then, if the mayor wants to allow someone to speak.
Always.
If he doesn't, you don't feel it needs to be presented to the remainder of the council, then I guess consent agenda is fine with me.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Scott. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, item number 3 on today's agenda is a request from Latah County for McConnell Mansion renovations, and Jen Piffner's involved in that? Or is maybe Gary's
I'll be
doing that?
presenting that. You have in your packets a letter from Latah County Commissioners regarding the request to assist in renovations from the McConnell Mansion. I would ask the chair's indulgence in asking them to come forward and present.
Yeah, I would welcome that. See, there's a number of them here.
2 out of 3. More than 50%.
That's a number.
Commissioner Lamar
expresses his disappointment that he can't be with us today. He's in what state, Dave?
Ohio, I think.
Ohio, on national county business. So we do thank you for an opportunity to meet with you. I'm not sure did everybody have a copy of this?
They do.
Yes.
If you can introduce yourself, Commissioner,
I'm sorry.
that'd be great.
I thought my reputation would precede me, apparently.
Quite
Well, it has, but for the record.
I'm Richard Walter, Latah County Commissioner, District 1.
I'm Dave McGraw, Latah County Commissioner, District 3.
Hi, guys.
Hey. So we come before you today to ask for your help but I also should introduce behind me, Kelsey Dursting is back there. She is the Executive Director at the Latah Historical Society. So we brought her for backup. Just don't back up too far. Closer than.
You're welcome to come and sit at the table if you like, Dulcie.
So again, we thank you for indulging us. We do have a request for money. We hope you can enlist your participation in some renovations to the McConnell Mansion, which we have before you. I don't know how much I need to talk about the choices we made, but we tried to pick out what was most critical to keeping the mansion in good working order, as it were. We identified the roof as immediate needs, and then we selected things that went along with the roof, even though they weren't immediate. If we do the roof, it made sense to do things that connected with the roof, rather than do the roof, shingles per se, and then go back in a year or two to try and do the decorative trim. It seemed like we'd just select that area to focus on. So we selected the re-roof, the widow's watch, and the roof decorative trim. Now, why we would love you guys to participate with us monetarily is because we feel that this mansion is a asset to to the city just as much as the county. And even though we own it, we would welcome any help that we could get from you guys at the city level to make sure that this mansion is a showcase that we're all proud of. And our feeling is that Moscow derives a great deal of benefit from this mansion. With that, I'll let Dave speak if you want to.
I guess probably the one thing I'd like to add, Commissioner Walser, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are half a dozen crown jewels in Latah County, East City Park, the 1912 building, Moscow Farmers Market, and I think McConnell Mansion can be counted amongst those as crown jewels. And I think everybody, as Commissioner Walser mentioned, everybody in Latah County enjoys the McConnell Mansion in Moscow, being its proximity to downtown, and probably enjoys it maybe more than the little old lady in Beauville, as I've been grown to use as an example. So anyway, we would welcome whatever support we could get from you all. Dulcie, do you have anything you'd like to say about the mansion?
Yeah. I work for the Latah County Historical Society, and I also work for Latah County, and we've had a really advantageous partnership for many years in that the county owns the property, but the Historical Society, as a separate 501c3, manages the property. And the agreement is essentially everything on the outside of the building is the county's responsibility, and everything on the inside of the building, including programs and use of the facility, is our responsibility as a nonprofit. But when it comes to these really big items, and items that unfortunately are just hard to fund for both local government and for a nonprofit, it really can't just be as simple as that's your responsibility and you have to pay for it, because it just might not get done. And so I'm really hopeful that as a partnership, we can get several entities together, and it's not so much of a hit for any one of us. And together we can collaboratively do these projects. And our ultimate goal, and it's really more of a 5 to 8 year plan, this is kind of phase one of it, is that we would really like to restore the McConnell Mansion to its glory. I think if you have ridden by at any time in the recent past, you might have noticed the unfortunate aluminum siding that was put on at some point in the past. There's some pretty significant rust stains in it. There's a reason that Victorian homes are so beautiful, and it's because of all the woodwork on it. They're also very challenging to maintain, as anyone with a historic house will know. So it's just constant upkeep, and we're hoping that in the next 5 to 8 years we can find a way to really restore it to its beautiful original glory, and I think in that way get people even more excited about it. We do see a lot of visitorship. I think we've seen an increase in visitorship over the last 5 years. Our numbers would bear that out. to say that the more programming our nonprofit has been doing in the space, the more people are aware of it, the more people go to it. And I would really love for there to be even more buzz about it. And the people who come to the mansion spend an hour or two there, and then they want to get lunch, and maybe they want to stay in town for a little while longer. So I do think that museums are an important part of the vitality of a community, and we are one of 2 museum spaces in Moscow. So I think that there's value in that too. There's the historic value, which I care most about from my professional training, but there's also the value it brings to the community kind of as a whole. Even if you're not in the mansion, there are benefits, I think, that come from it.
If I, Jim, may I add one more observation?
Mr. Walser?
This is going to seem like flattery, but I hope you don't take it as that. This is the truth. We feel very comfortable coming before you people to ask for money. It's not something we do all the time. I'm not sure we've ever done it. But we have, in my opinion, I'm sure David would agree, a very wonderful relationship with the city of Moscow and its officials and its councilors. So thank you for this opportunity. And again, we're very comfortable to be here. We feel like we're among friends.
Well, that's the truth. You are among friends, and we're all in the same boat, so to speak, in terms of property tax, divvying up the property tax and how we spend it, and I feel that it is an asset that we should jointly maintain, and I would support the city of Moscow putting up $10,500 out of our discretionary funds for this year to help with this project, and would entertain any comments from the other members of the committee.
Dick, when I talked to you the other day, it's not anticipated this work will be done until next spring. Is that still correct?
Well, jump in here, Dulcie. I'm guessing absolutely. Or if you're lucky, if it'd be next spring. As we all know, the contractors are just swamped. I don't know anybody that's looking for work. So I don't, it's too late to start now if you could.
Okay.
So I would guess this would come to fruition. The start would be in 2 years from now. And
the county is putting up money from this current year budget and then money from your next budget.
Yes.
Okay.
So excuse me.
Yeah. So Jim, we've got 10.5, Gary, in the current what I call legislative reserve remaining that can come out of this budget. Would it, if the council wanted to do it, would it be appropriate to go ahead and take the $9,000 balance of the request out of the 2018 budget, legislative reserve?
You can certainly anticipate that. We will have, since the budget has not been passed,
right.
We'd be putting the cart ahead of the horse, but as soon as the new budget year starts, we could bring that before you at that time. And certainly you could say that's your intent, and we could bring it forward officially at that time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good.
So, if I may, so it's the intent of the council, at least in concept, to fund the full 19.5 request, 10.5 out of this year's non-prioritized projects, which will exhaust that line item, and then to bring back before you the balance of $9,000 after October 1st, and the new budget is in place.
I think these three council members feel that way. We can put this before full council and let them decide.
And obviously, we're going to have a different council to some extent next year, so.
The decision could be made before, if you're concerned about the election, the decision can be made at the first meeting in October. So we would bring it back to this committee, the first Public Works Committee in October, and then present it at the first or second council meeting in October.
If we want to make that happen, I think that's the way to proceed.
Okay.
So,
Jim, if on our side, it would be very similar. The parallel pattern would be that too. We'd budget into this year half, and the next year the other half.
Since there's 10 weeks left in this budget year, I don't see anything on the horizon where we might need $10,500 for some other project that's on the horizon. So, I think we should put this on the regular agenda and move forward.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
Coming.
And I could reiterate what I just said about we love you guys. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Okay, item number 4 on today's agenda is consideration of City of Moscow Mayor and City Council salary adjustments. Rod Hall's he's the presenter on this, but he seems to be chained to his chair, so
I will be
we'll have to get him
covering that
released,
as
and
well.
then he can.
Gary did not anticipate being here, so.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you have before you the Moscow City Code and Idaho Code, which designates that if council and elected official salaries are going to be adjusted, they need to be adjusted within a certain time frame in advance of the coming municipal elections. So we're a little bit behind in our ordinance, which says that it should be done 6 months ahead of the general election. Idaho Code only dictates that it has to be, how long? Yeah, that's right. 75 days. We're well within that. There was a miscalculation in the original that you were given. In 2015, the calculation was done incorrectly. It resulted in an adjustment that should have been, it was about $2.60, I believe, for the mayor's salary. It was off by $1.89 a month, and council salaries were off 66 cents per month. So we have adjusted that. You can certainly make a claim for those back salaries that you feel entitled to, but the new adjustments, which consist of the CPI adjustment, which was given, granted by the council for 2015 and 16 to be applied to the FY 2018 salaries. So we've adjusted the numbers, applied the 2.9%, and the numbers that you see have been adjusted in the ordinance right down here in legislative format. So that would be the adjustment beginning January 1 of 2018.
It's pretty straightforward. Anybody have any objections?
It's straightforward as explained by Gary. I think it was a little less than straightforward getting
It
there.
was.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out to us. A couple cents makes a difference. So with that, we would ask that because of the nature of this ordinance, that depending on what this committee wants to do, that it be presented in regular agenda.
Yes,
Yeah, I would
agreed.
That would be good.
recommend that as well.
Okay, so is there a consensus on the?
Yeah, I think we're
Recommend-
unanimous on the
recommend approval.
recommendation
Okay,
for
thank you.
approval. Thank you, Gary, for the correction of the numbers, and the 66 cents a month is obviously quite significant. Okay, item number 5 on today's agenda is downtown parking program revisions. Les, what do you got for us on this? Going to change things when people can park overnight and walk home after being inebriated and things like that.
Well, that has something to do with it. So. Good afternoon. Well, the city has received a number of requests about the potential for implementing essentially an expansion of the overnight parking restriction that currently exists within the downtown core. So I wanted to take just a couple minutes and kind of run you through a little bit of the history, because not everybody was here back in 2007, 2009 when we had our last major undertaking in reviewing parking in the downtown area. So I'll just take a minute or two to run through that, just to bring you up to speed a little bit, and then we'll talk specifically about the area that is being addressed in those requests. So this is a map showing our current regulated downtown parking zone. Just to help orient you a little bit, north is to the left. This is Main Street running right through the middle, left to right. And there's a lot of different colored lines on here because we have different overlays of parking regulations within the downtown core. So the heavy red lines you see along the edges, those are all just no parking, just restricted parking 24/7 in those locations, and primarily along the highway, the couplet, and portions of 3rd Street and 6th Street. Then within that, we have the 3-hour parking zone, which is this kind of a dashed tan orange line here, and you can see it running through and around the core of the downtown. This is Gritman here. Kind of runs along the west side of Jackson and then back up in that area. So 1st Street really down to about 8th Street, College area. So within that 3-hour limitation, 8 to 5 a.m., Monday through Friday. That's the one that was of a lot of discussion back in '09 about whether or not that should change. It did not. The next overlay is the green line, which represents the limited locations where the council has, in the past, agreed to allow overnight parking. Just to allow overnight parking within that downtown core. Those locations were chosen primarily to provide parking options for folks that were, participating in the nightlife in the downtown
beverage.
core. Yeah, the adult beverage choices that they might make, and needing a place to park so that they did not have an issue with driving when they should not. So that was part of the driver of that, is to provide parking options for those folks that were down there participating in the nightlife. The other aspect was we wanted to provide some overnight parking options for downtown residents, because there are quite a few within the central business district. So those are the green spots, and then the final one is that kind of dashed purple line that runs all the way around the outside of most of this. That is the area where we have restricted overnight parking in general between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. And that was done for snow removal and cleanup in the commercial core, because we want a little higher level of service for cleanliness and picking up the curb lines and those types of things, and the trash in that central business district, snow removal being a big part of that. So that's the overall picture as it exists today. Okay,
But Les, if I might,
yes, sir.
the 3 to 6 was a more or less recent change, because it used to be start earlier.
It used to be
and
2
go
to 7.
2 to 7.
And I'll touch on that here
Okay.
in just a second. So, all right. So the area we're going to be talking about as we get into this is circled here in blue. It's essentially that area between Jackson, Maine, and C to D. So circled there. But just to step back in time a little bit, and this is not the beginning of downtown parking, but this was kind of where the more modern look came into be, starting back in 1981. This is before the couplet was completed and installed, and you can see where the city implemented a 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. No parking time frame. This is what Walter's just talking about in that yellow zone here. So it's pretty extensive. You can see it went a long ways to the north, and I think that has much to do with it as anything, is that this was just highway corridor through here, and parking was allowed. It was a different street configuration back at that time, two-way traffic all the way through there. There was a 3-hour parking zone limitation in the brown back in that time frame. The blue star here represents the location we're going to be talking about today, just so you can see how it falls in and out of these regulations over time. And one important aspect of this, just running through these, is to show you that we've changed it a lot. So it's been somewhat of a fluid set of boundaries, and we've made revisions over the years based on the needs that we saw at that particular time. In 1983, this was the somewhat modified version. I think we've shortened the north end a little bit. I think we did some extensions a little bit further to the west on 3rd and 6th at that time. Just a few changes, but it was still there. And at that time, we incorporated this block that we're now talking about. Okay, so that was one change that occurred. In 2009, after much discussion with Transportation Commission and the public and the council and many different things, this was the set of standards that was in place at that time in May. And you can see here the green represents that overnight parking restriction zone, if you will. This kind of highlighted reddish pink here is where all the 3-hour was active. We didn't have any overnight allowed within that at that time. And again, our site is here within that 3-hour or that overnight restriction. And this is just the overnight restriction map, cleaning this up. And where we made a change then on the overnights, at that time we were still 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. with this boundary, and then we changed it to this, where we said, okay, it's no longer 2 a.m. to 7, it was going to be 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., so we reduced the time for the overnight restriction and reduced the size. And so you can see the changes here. The area we're talking about now was excluded at that point, along with a little bit of area here on 3rd Street that is really just no parking anyway. And we actually increased the size a little bit on the south end around Gritman as they were expanding, in their usage to the south. The reason this was excluded at the time, as I recall, was that at that point, some of the businesses that had been there had gone away, had shut down. Think of Stookies, things like that. So we weren't seeing a lot of commercial activity occurring then. And so I think the feeling was that the council and those involved at that point was, hey, we can scale this back. It's not such a high-intensity use that we have to be there at night doing all those nightly activities that we do in the rest of the central business district. Also in 2009, this is then the new map, if you will, that was included as part of the resolution. You can see here in red where we included those few blocks where we allowed overnight parking within the overall restricted parking zone. And again, that was due to the bar patrons and the downtown residents.
And that's worked out well. Or
it has worked out
well enough.
Yeah, I think so. It's it's always a little hard to tell how much it's used by folks for those different groups. Certainly, the residents are using them down there. We think there's probably a certain amount of the bar patrons that also take advantage of that. And that's where we were in 13. Again, kind of the overall map. Again, you can see that we're out of those regulated zones with this site. The last change that we made was actually just a little over a year ago, and that is where we added this one block on the south side of 6th between Washington and Jefferson into the allowed overnight parking. So that's something the council approved back in June of 2016, really at the request of a lot of the residences that were here that just didn't see that there was any commercial parking going on there, but the residents had a need to be able to park out on the street in front of their homes. So the council approved that back in 2016. All right, so that gets you really up to speed of where we are today. Again, we are currently, this site is outside of those regulated zones. And what we want to talk about, we're going to go back to this 2009 map to talk about this change here and what is now proposed. So if we look at the aerial, this is the site. This is Main Street, Highway 95, portions of the couplet going on to Jackson here, D Street, C Street over in this area, the Triangle parking lot that the council leased out a few years ago, all of that. There's the recycle center, those kind of facilities. So that gives you an idea of what the overall uses are. This is the current overnight parking restriction boundary, as last approved by the City Council. And what is being requested, essentially, or recommended as a result of the request, is that the boundary be extended as shown here in green. This did go through Transportation Commission a couple weeks ago. We talked about what would be the potential impacts of such a change and expansion. Why would we want to make this change? Obviously, we've had the request applications that are in your packets that talk about the need from the perspective of some of the businesses here. But really a couple things that came up during the Transportation Commission discussion. One is that really this is an area that has become much more active since 2009. You think about it, we have a couple of new businesses here, this location and here, in Rants and Raves and the Hunga Dunga breweries. We've got Culligan doing their thing. We've got Viral Science here. We've got the new coffee shop up in this location with a lot of traffic involved with that. And then other businesses here and here as well. Recycle Center, of course, is still active, doing what it does. So it's an area that has kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit over the years, but we're at the point now where we're seeing increased traffic, increased congestion in the area, and obviously through the request in your packet, you can see that there's been some conflict, if you will, related to parking, access, and just general maintenance of the road system, and potential snow removal around these businesses. So that's why the request. The Transportation Commission also brought up something that honestly staff had not really considered at that point, which is the issue of, okay, in the downtown we've already established some allowed overnight parking for the bar patrons in recognition of the fact that they may not be in a condition to drive, so put your car here. Initially, when this was taken forward to the Transportation Commission, we included all of D Street within the proposed expanded zone for parking restrictions. But the point was made, and I think it was a very good one, that, well, we have a couple of, in essence, bar facilities here that serve alcohol, and should we not have a similar consideration for some kind of overnight parking to allow those patrons a place to put their vehicles. It was a good discussion. Some of the differences here are that both of these facilities have off-street parking available to them to some extent. So they do have some parking in front of Hunga Dunga and some parking here as part of Rants and Raves. So that could be used by the patrons. But we also felt, coming out of transportation, and their recommendation was go ahead and make the expansion, but let's keep the north side of D Street along the frontage of Rosars as allowed overnight parking just outright. So keep it outside of this district expansion. So that is what is on the map. That is the proposal that staff is bringing forward for consideration by the council. That's what's reflected in the resolution that is in your packet. So from this point, the normal process on these would be to go ahead and, if this committee so desires, move forward to council for consideration. I know in the past the council has taken some public testimony if there's a desire by the mayor to do that. We would certainly reach out to the folks that are within this proposed area or area of the proposed change so that they would be notified of the potential for some parking revisions here. So they'd be aware of what's being proposed and be notified of an upcoming meeting if that is what this group chooses to do.
Mr. Reedner.
So, Les, the Transportation Commission did consider that both Rants and Raves and Hunga Dunga have on-site parking lots.
Yes, they did.
So, unlike downtown bars or people who frequent downtown bars, there is no public parking except in the public parking lots or along the street for patrons of those businesses.
Yeah, that was seen as the distinction in those businesses in more of the central core along Main Street. They do not have the option of off-street parking. In many cases, there are some opportunities, but in close proximity to their businesses, there's not a lot. It's really just what's on street, and that was part of the reasoning back in '09 to allow some on-street overnight parking. Here, the difference is that, yes, they do have some off-street, in essence, private parking lots that serve those two businesses, and that would take care of at least some portion of those parking needs.
And the recommendation from Transportation is to extend the prohibition of overnight parking as requested.
And as shown with this green line, yes.
Not as originally taken to transportation.
Sure.
Yeah, the applicants that submitted the requests did not really specify exactly what zone. They were just seeing that, hey, we got a problem, in particular on Jackson, but wanted to see something addressed. One of them talked about some specific sign locations. And it was really staff that looked at this and said, okay, here's what we think would be a logical adjustment to the boundary, considering the type of business that's here, which at that point included all of D Street between Main and Jackson. And then it was modified based on Transportation Commission's input to exclude the north side of D Street.
If I may. Les, currently around that green box, where is parking allowed?
Right now it's allowed on both sides of Jackson, really from here all the way up, keeping in mind there's a series of driveways along the way, here, here, and here, and on both sides, so you can see the tick marks there, both sides of D Street, again with an alley in the middle. I think that's the only break, and of course the driveway here. So yes, parking...
Not allowed on Main, and it's not allowed in the...
nothing up here. Correct. Correct.
Yeah, the thing's different about this is that it's outside the central business district, so off-street parking is required, not just available, whereas in the central business district, it's not required at all. So that's a difference when we're tagging this on. But I think it's a great idea to leave D open next to the Rosars parking lot, so there's some overnight parking, and then if it's not allowed along Jackson, then that facilitates snow removal in the wintertime and access to the recycling center and visibility at the corners there. So it seems like a reasonable request to me.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
I'm okay with it. I do think that the occupants, I don't know if any residents is anywhere in there or not.
There are some residents in the.
That
Stuckey Bill.
we should let them know we're thinking about doing this. I know it's not required, but to do it, I think they should be told it's coming up.
I would agree with that. I think the more information, the better.
And it is consistent with our practice when we are looking at changes in parking on a particular street in front of, a parcel of land. We try to reach out to those folks and let them know. So we can certainly do that here.
Okay. Great.
Okay, I think this is an item we want to move forward onto the regular agenda and
Okay.
give the mayor an opportunity to ask for public comment if he wishes to do so.
And recommend approval or
And,
not?
I would recommend approval.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Les. Okay, item number 6 on today's agenda is the skater replacement project bid award. Tyler's going to tell us about this and technical side of what's going on here and how we monitor our water and wastewater and all that.
Absolutely. So in the agenda, you'll see that SCADA, what it stands for, is Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. The early 90s may not seem like that long ago, but if you think about the computers that you were using in the early 90s, they're probably nothing like what we're using today. I think about, the last phone that I had just a few years ago, I can get a phone with 2 terabytes of data now, and 2 years ago, I remember my first memory stick. It was a 256K that was in 2006, and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So the SCADA system we're currently using is from the early 90s.
Were you born then?
I was in junior high. The people that we've had come out and look at the current SCADA system, I think they are all pretty interested in having it go straight to a museum when we get out of here. It might be one of the oldest ones still in operation, which really is a testament to Tom Scalorn in his years here. I mean, the man, he could write code, and a lot of the code that we use, Tom actually personally wrote and put in, and so he was able to keep this thing limping along all these years. But as you know, Tom Scalorn retired, and this system is desperately in need for updating and replacement. It gives us a lot of capabilities currently and moving toward the future, just in monitoring and keeping an eye on our critical systems. As you know, producing and distributing water is one of the most important things that we do as a municipal government, and it just has to be right all the time. And this is a system that helps us monitor and keep it right. We've got really dedicated staff that with our older system, they put in a lot of hours having to come out and physically do checks that they don't have to do when we get a modern system in place. They'll be able to make corrections to things without actually having to physically come out on site for certain things. It just they've come such a long way. So this is a project to replace that. We had an engineer's estimate of $483,881. We had one responsive bidder. We're happy to see that it's a local company, Strom Electric, and that we got a very competitive bid from them, $357,000. We had the bid reviewed by our consulting engineer for this project, and they're very comfortable that Strom has the capabilities and that their subcontractors will be good providers of equipment. We had a pre-qualification and an approved vendor list for the materials that will be used in this. There are panels that are prefabricated, and we specified an approved list of providers for those panels, which is really the critical part of the system. And they're using one of our preferred providers for this, and so we have no reason to think that we won't get a great product out of this. So with that, I would stand for any questions. This does involve both sewer and water. It's coming out of the capital budgets in both sewer and water. There's a slight typo in the, I guess maybe it could be confusing in the resources and impacts section of this. It cites some revenue lines. There was rollover funding from last year. Well, not rollover funding. It's in the capital budget, and so it shows as revenues. So those lines were cited, but the entirety of the funding is contained within the water capital and the sewer capital budget lines under our electrical systems and controls line in the capital budgets.
Walter?
2 things. Looking at how low the bid is compared to the estimate, is Strom comfortable with it?
Yeah, that was one of our concerns, Walter, is that we wanted to make sure, with as old as our system is, there was a little bit of uncertainty about, okay, we had to look at the locations, the size of things has changed, the amount of capabilities has changed, and so we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting where we had any potential bidders come out and we took them on tours and showed them the sites and said, look, anything that you need to see to be able to confidently submit a bid, we'll take you around and have you shown. So we went and toured the facilities so that they could see where they would be installing, what was available, what wasn't there, and so they are comfortable with their bid.
Did
So
you,
this is- I'm sorry.
if I may, did you have other contractors go on the pre-bid, or did you have other interests that you didn't see bid?
We had one other contractor, another local contractor, KME Electrical Specialties, went on the bid. They're a newer company, and they had a few of the requirements that made it difficult for them to actually get the bid in. I'm speculating here, so this, take it as such. But with a lot of the cost in a project like this being wrapped up in the panels themselves, in the material acquisition, it can be more difficult for someone who has to mobilize to Moscow to be competitive in bid pricing, because so much of the cost is going to be in just getting the materials here. So then if somebody is local and they can do the install without having to pay for per diem and mobilization and that sort of thing, so if there are competent local contractors, I think that people from further abreast are going to be less inclined to put the effort into putting in a bid when it's likely that a local person will be able to be more
Tickle
competitive.
with a number.
Yeah.
Gina.
So this is down in that tunnel, correct? You're replacing what's down in there.
So that's at the our wastewater treatment plant,
Yes.
and there is a PLC that will be replaced there. That'll probably
Okay.
come before the council within the next, I would say 3 months. We're
see that.
starting kind of the pre-design process on that. That is in the capital budget for sewer. This is for the systems on the sewer side and the conveyance side of the system, so our lift stations would be included in this, and then it's for the water distribution system, so our wells, our booster stations, our filters, and that sort of
Okay,
thing. So
good.
this current project does that first piece, and then we'll have a second piece coming forward for the plant.
Okay, I'm glad to see that.
Go ahead, Lynn, I've got one more.
In terms of how this is budgeted for, how much of this is in capital budget in this year's budget, and how much is coming from
We had
next?
$500,000 that was initially put into the capital line last year, and we augmented that by $100,000 in the current budget, and so there's currently $600,000 in the capital budget that is flagged for this project.
It'll be expended out of capital.
Yeah.
So I think that answers my question. This expenditure was anticipated in this fiscal year.
Yes,
Yeah, that's where I was trying to get.
Is that what you said?
That's what I was trying to get.
that's correct. Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions. Gina, Walter?
I would consent agenda this thing and get it signed
Yeah.
before they change their mind.
Anything that's over $100,000 under budget, we're all about that.
Yeah, we'll take it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tyler.
Tyler. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is Kevin's going to give us a report on the State Highway 8 underpass, pedestrian bicycle underpass.
Near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, very much so. One of two.
You shall have it.
You-
We
Are you a
are,
wizard?
no comment. You're all aware of that project. We applied for it back a couple of years ago. It's been fully funded through LTAC. LTAC's going to be administering the community choices projects now. Our last one, ITD, was still had their hands in it, but this one will be administered by LTAC. They are, we selected TerraGraphics to do the design. We're waiting on the agreement, and why I'm bringing this to you without the agreement is I was hoping to have the agreement last week. I was hoping to have it this week. If there is a chance that we can get it prior to the council meeting, I was requesting that it be allowed to be added to the agenda for the council without coming to committee, the actual agreement. So we have plenty of funding for it. We had, I think, 61.5 in the application, and I think their cost for the agreement is going to be 58. So there's no issue there. It's just that there were some hiccups in the processing of the agreement. One of the sub-consultants, All West, does materials work. They had an expired overhead rate in their calculation. Turns out their overhead rate actually went down, so their cost will be just a little less, but that's kind of held things up. So I'm hoping to get this in the next few days. And if so, I would ask Les to bring it to council on the 7th. If we don't make the 7th, we'll have to wait 2 weeks until the 21st. So the design funds are in this year, and we do want to get it designed by, say, January so we can get it out to bid. So I'm hoping to cut off 2 weeks by bringing this to you now.
Yeah, well, we do have, since this is a 5 Monday month, we do have 2 weeks before the next council meeting, so it gives you extra time
Yeah,
to do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So,
Hopefully
yeah.
that's,
So hopefully that will work out.
yeah.
Yeah, I would okay that.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the update.
All right, if no one else has anything to add, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting of the Public Works Finance Committee.
You're motioned.
Second.
Thank you, people.